Hi, my name's Nick Rains from Leica Academy Australia, and in this video I'd like to share with you my experiences of shooting with the Leica M10-P. There's something about shooting with a rangefinder camera which just is completely different to shooting with other sorts of cameras. It's not necessarily easier, that's for sure, but there's a certain satisfaction in challenging yourself to work with a system which hasn't changed a great deal for quite a few years. Obviously, apart from the sensor in the back, but this rangefinder system, shooting like this, has not changed since 1954, I suppose, and the whole shape of the camera, the whole feel of it has that retro look and feel, which I find very compelling. It's a beautifully made bit of equipment, and for some people it's just the epitome of fine photography. So what I wanted to do with this video is to have a look at some of the images that I've shot with this camera and introduce you to some of the ideas that I've managed to come up with over the years about shooting with this particular type of camera. And also I'll just have a quick word about the lenses and the equipment that I use with it. So one of the most important things, of course, is that it's a small camera. It's not a dirty great big DSLR. It's discreet. It's not light. I mean, when you pick one of these things up, you'll go, crikey, that's a little bit heavier than I thought, but it's extremely solid construction, beautifully built. And that's actually part of the appeal, the heft of the whole camera. Feels good in the hand. It doesn't have ergonomic grips on it, although you can add an extra grip here. But I find it just fits in my hand really nicely. So you can really go out for the day with 2 lenses, 3 lenses, in a little bag, maybe adding this, which I'll talk about in a sec, and you're good. And you start to look for the sorts of pictures that you can shoot with this rig, rather than trying to cover all eventualities. And there's nothing worse in my mind than going out with a dirty great big bag or backpack full of cameras and lenses, not knowing what to expect, and then having to dip into it all the time and work out what you're going to use. Just commit to a small amount of gear and a nice tight set of lenses, even just one. This is a 50mm Summicron lens, that's the 50mm Semi-Lux lens, which is the f1.4 variant. And just work with that. Look for the pictures that you can shoot. Take it easy, enjoy yourself. You know that no one's putting any pressure on you to come up with award-winning images. It's all from here. Unless, of course, you're like me and I'm commissioned to shoot some pictures. But the pictures I want to share with you today are really personal pictures, the sorts of pictures that I take not so much when I'm on holiday, but when I'm on a trip, which may be for different purposes. And when I'm doing my serious work, I will probably use a Leica SL2 because it has certain features and facilities which this camera doesn't have. But when it's just for me and for the sheer enjoyment of making images, this is the camera I would like to take with me most of the time. Just to give you a bit of an overview, obviously it's an M-mount camera, so this is the M50mm, or the Semi-Lux M 50mm lens. I find the 50mm lens my personal favourite for that middle of the range lens. I'm not a big fan of the 35mm lenses. That's just me. That's not to say it's better or worse. I just see better with a 50mm lens. Either side of that, I have 2 very clear favourite lenses. For the wide, I'm really happy with my 18mm super-elmar M lens. I really like that really wide look. I really like the really wide look, yes. I just find, especially shooting into the light, you get this lovely set, all the shadows just draw your eye in, and there's a few examples later where it exaggerates the perspective and it gives you this real pull into the shot. So I would rather go super wide, and you can always crop. Like somebody says, why not use a 21mm, which of course is one of the classic lenses, but I prefer the 18 for the simple reason that I've got a 21 as well. What I've got to do is crop the picture slightly. But if I had a 21 and not an 18, I can't uncrop the 21mm shot, so I go slightly wider than I need. I've had this lens for, oh crikey, it must be 5 or 6 years now. I started in M with the M240, and this was the first lens I bought, and still going strong. The other lens I've got here, which is a little bit more exotic, or a bit more esoteric I should say, is a 1965 90mm Elmarit. So that's an f2.5 lens. There's a couple of different versions of this one. There's a Summicron version, which is the f2 version. It's quite a lot more expensive, but that's f2. I've got the f2.8 version. 1965, that's almost as old as me. Fits on the M beautifully with the adapter. Up until the M240 came out, it was not possible to realistically put R lenses onto M cameras because you couldn't focus them. There's a rangefinder mechanism and there's no rangefinder cam on the back of the lens. Which takes me to this little fellow. This is the Visoflex, which fits onto the top of the M2, not the M240, the M10, and obviously the monochrome, and it gives you an electronic viewfinder. It's essentially the same as looking on the back of the camera in live view, which is the LV button here, live view, but you have it in a viewfinder, which is shrouded and it's dark and it gives you this beautiful view. That means that as you're focusing, you're seeing the focusing happen in the screen. You've got focus peaking, you've got levels, all the stuff that's on the back of the cameras in the viewfinder. That little device there transforms the M from a slightly tricky to use camera at first until you get the hang of it, to a camera that you can use pretty much straight out of the box. When I see people using the M10 without this, I always suggest them that they at least go into the store and have a look. And it's amazing how many people put this on the camera, start working with it, and they go, oh my God, that's just astonishing. Well, how did I not know about this? And they'll buy it on the spot. You can adjust the diopter here. It's superb. So the R lens on here fits onto the camera, and I'm using this to focus with it. With the Elmar, I don't need to because it's a rangefinder and super wide anyway, so the focusing is a little bit more vague. You don't really need to focus too much. There's plenty of depth of field with such a lens. And then with the Semilux lens here, the 50mm Semilux, I do tend to use a Visoflex because it does give you that critical focus. It magnifies in the viewfinder so you can see that point of focus just perfectly before you shoot. I would, just to compare, rangefinder and Visoflex, they are both equally good but in different ways. The rangefinder is very accurate, no question, but it's a little bit hard to judge sometimes, but it's fast, really fast once you've got the hang of it. The Visoflex is easier to judge because you can see critically in the viewfinder whether it's sharp or not, but it's a bit slower. So if you're in a hurry, use the rangefinder. If you've got the time, use the Visoflex. And if you really have no time, then you'll start zone focusing here, but that's a story for a different day. All right, that's enough about the camera. Let's have a look at some pictures. I'll talk through them, tell you which lens I use, and it'll give you an idea of how versatile this camera is. All right, so this is a picture that I took in Monterey in California. I took the M10 with me on a trip to the States that I was doing. I was doing a speaking talk, obviously, a speaking circuit of Los Angeles, Seattle and New York for Leica, which was really good fun. And in between the dates, I had a bit of time to go and do some of my own photographs. So most of the pictures you'll see in this section are pictures I just took just for fun, no particular purpose, not for a client, just that appealed to me. The reason I put this image in is it just shows up how much of the contrast can be controlled just by using the camera at exactly the right exposure. This is a very contrasty subject, as you can see. It's just lit with a single window, and that shadow under the table is really, really deep. And when you look deep into the file, you've still got a lot of shadow detail to pull out. I've made this picture deliberately contrasty because that's my personal taste in black and white, but I just wanted to put it in to give you an idea of just how good the images can be. Back to colour briefly, and there's a mixture of colour and black and white. I'm flicking between them fairly randomly. This is using the 90mm Elmar. This is this little lens here that I showed you before, if you can see that. This is a shot of one of those outdoor gym setups they have at not Venice Beach, but where would it be? A little bit further up from there. There's a few along the coast there. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But there's lots of local people do their training, and there's some seriously fit young men and women who will do this swinging around on various rope swings and bars. And this is a big set of, I don't know what you call them, hoops that you can hang on and then swing. And it's amazing what they get up to. With the Elmar lens, It's not so quick to focus. It's beautifully smooth and it's perfectly you're perfectly connected to that focus point, but it's not the sort of lens that you'd want to use to follow focus. So I will usually set up the shot and focus where I need to focus and let the action happen. In this case, it was really a case of timing so that the guy was in just the right position, and I quite like his vertical position in this shot against the bars. And I've cropped the ground off as well because it's not adding anything to the picture, so it becomes slightly abstract. This next picture will give you an idea, completely different kind of shot, taken from almost the same position. It's a different piece of apparatus. This is a series of hoops that you have to swing from one to the next and catch the next one, like a monkey swing. It's really cool. And for this one, I used the 18mm Elmar, super-elmar, and looking straight up into the sun. And as the people came through and swung through, I was just timing it. And this one I managed to catch just as he's reaching for that hoop. And that's one of the great things about the M series cameras. They're very responsive on the shutter button for your timing. It's also a lens which works well into the sun. That's not flare around the sun. You can see that that's actually a cloud filtering it slightly, but you can see a bit of a starburst as the sun is cut by the actual railing itself. This is the same part of the world next to those that same apparatus, and this is just a little inshore lagoon. I think it's at the end of a big storm drain, and it stays full of water for quite a period of time. And I always like looking for really big puddles or large or small bodies of water that you can get the camera really low to, and it gives you this mirror effect. I'm also a big fan of interesting clouds, as some of you who are listening to this video will know. I've banged on about clouds quite a bit, and this sky was so spectacular I couldn't possibly resist. It was actually a storm approaching, and we were just thinking about whether it was time to head back to the hotel, and managed to capture this one. So I quite enjoyed that shot. Another part of Los Angeles, this is it's a sculpture, an installation sculpture outside a building in Los Angeles. And from the outside, it looks interesting. And all the pictures you'll see are taken horizontally. And it's like a series of pillars, if you can imagine, and lights, and lots of people weave in amongst it and take the pictures themselves and so on. What I did was I lay on the ground right in the middle of the whole array, and I used my 18mm super-elmar and shot straight up towards the sky. We also timed it so that we were there at around about last light, so that the lights themselves are on, as you can see, but the sky has still got some colour in it. I don't really like it to be so late that the sky is black, but I do like the warmth of those lights against the blue of the sky. So just going for super graphic, but can you see how much that 18mm pulls in those diagonals and really gives it that dynamic look? Another place we went to out of Seattle was a place called Butchart Gardens, which is probably one of the best gardens in the world. And I was traveling with my wife, and the deal was we take some photographs, we go to some gardens, we take some photographs, we go to some gardens, you know, something for everybody. But of course, as a photographer, there's something everywhere to be photographed. And I had a lovely time with my 90mm Elmarite and my M10, just trying to do separations of flowers against interesting backgrounds. And obviously Leica lenses are particularly good at that, because when you shoot with them wide open, you still get the sharpness, but you get that lovely drift of focus into the background, which you can see quite clearly in this shot. There's also some nice elevated viewpoints in the gardens because it's actually in an old quarry, and I found this was a really interesting viewpoint because it had that sort of painterly feel, and when you isolate the elements with that 90mm Elmarite, you can really work with the compositions and the shapes, and I found this quite an interesting combination. And there's a certain three-dimensionality to it which may not show on the video screen as you're watching it, but certainly when I look at the original file on my bigger monitor, it has a real three-dimensionalness to it, which is a little bit hard to quantify. Picture like this, same sort of thing. This is an Acer tree, I believe, or Japanese maple, not exactly sure, but it's still got that lovely autumn feel, and we were there in the autumn, and that whole arrangement of colours and everything, it's just picked out beautifully, and the lens has drawn the image beautifully. This is what I was talking about with the 18mm. It's got this stretching of perspective, which I find very powerful. So this is a bed of tulips, and this is what the garden is known for. There are hundreds of thousands of tulips in this garden. It's astonishing. But by standing up as high as I could, and holding the camera out at arm's length, as high as I possibly could, and pointing it down, I could get this vertical down shot with a super wide lens, and you can see how all the stems of the plants like come springing out from the background. They really give that a sense of it's quite dynamic. It's a little bit different to the across the top shot where you're going for out of focus backgrounds and picking out a single flower. This is a totally different feel, and it's got this sort of whooshing quality to it, which I really like. Then on to New York. I was just a tourist in New York. I stayed just around the corner from Times Square. I had a day or so to kill before my talk at B&H in New York, and I just went out doing what everybody else does, just wandering the streets, taking pictures. So I headed around the corner to Times Square, as one does, and I did this panorama shot, which was with my 18mm Elmar. 6 shots, 180 degrees, and this is also at dusk, so you've got that nice color in the sky, but all the street lights are on. So there's about, I don't know, half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, depending on how north or south you are in the world. But you get this lovely twilight, and with the city lights balancing with the sky, you've got color in the sky. It's not just black, but you've also got the city lights. And at the right time of the day, you can still handhold pictures. This was taken on the M10-P, of course, at about 3200 ISO. So something like 5.6, 3200 ISO, handheld. Beautiful, beautiful images. I would probably happily print this at about 40 or 50 inches wide. That's how much resolution you've got. It means 24 megapixels natively, and then there's 6 shots here. So it would make a really big image file. Then I headed down to where the World Trade Center used to be. This is the Oculus on the left, which is an amazing piece of architecture. And you can have a lovely time wandering around there, photographing their modern architecture, making shapes and patterns. I've just thrown a few in, and I was lucky to have a blue sky day with some little white puffy clouds. Makes all the difference. So that little cloud there makes a huge difference to the shot. It just adds some texture. And again, this is with my 18mm Elmar. It's my favorite lens. I could probably walk around all day with that one lens and never change it. Same with this one. And can you see the shadows, which are actually reflections of, no, sorry, a different picture. That is the shadows cast by the spine sticking out of the spine of the building. But because I'm shooting on such a wide angle lens, they recede very strongly into the shot. So there's this sense of it taking your eye into the shot. And there is actually a man stood on his phone in the bottom left hand corner there, and the idea is that takes you into the shot with those lines when you see the man. So that's a bit of a hiding a subject so that you find it later, something I like to do where possible. I did some shots very, very early on when I first got this camera, and this is the centre of Australia, and the last few pictures are Australia's red centre. This is Ormiston Gorge, 50mm semi-lux lens at about an hour after the sun's risen, and I'm fairly familiar with this neck of the woods, and I know that the sun tends to shine down the gorge to the top right. There's a big gorge where you can walk down, so it shines onto the rocks on the left but not on the right, so you get this pool, like a spotlight of the light, and at just the right time of day you get this lovely sense of depth because it's illuminated in the distance but the foreground is still nice and cool, so you get this nice sense of three-dimensionality, and of course you get the reflection in the water as well. I did take the 50mm Noctilux with me as well. It was I took it with me just to try out some images, and this is a shot of some of the red gums around the gorge, and you can see that lovely Noctilux sort of weird focus effect. Obviously it's got limited depth of field, but it also does some interesting things around the outside of the frame. The bottom, the rock there is really out of focus, as is the rock in the distance, even though they're not very far apart. So the Nocti is just great for having some fun with focus. Same lens, Noctilux, but in this particular case I was using it as a normal lens, probably shooting at about 5.6. I didn't really want to use it for limited depth of field, and this is just one of the gums growing out of this rock face, also in Ormiston Gorge. It's a spectacular part of the world. If you get a chance to go there, I highly recommend it. Just showing the versatility of the camera. I mean, now I'm using it as a pure landscape camera. It's a camera with 24 megapixels. That's it. You can use it for street, which is what it's associated with. You can use it for commercial photography if you wanted to. You can use it for travel, use it for landscape. Just use it for anything, and it's very portable. There, that gives you an idea of what you can get out of the Nocti. There's really nice light in the gorge, and there's a richness to those colors which the Leica glass really picks up. I could pick this shot as being a Leica shot anywhere, I reckon, because of the richness of those greens for one thing, and it's almost like the colors are just that little bit more saturated with the Leica lenses, something like that. I mean, all of these shots are pretty much straight out of camera. I just call it sweetened for presentation, which means they've had some basic adjustments made in Lightroom, but nothing much more than that. They're certainly not being exaggerated or anything. They are pretty much as I saw them, and that's kind of my style, if you like. Low light. This is way after the sun's gone down, and I'm actually waiting for a star shot, which I'll show you in a sec. But this is the 18mm again on the M10P, and that's about a 32-second exposure at base ISO, and it's completely noiseless. It's quite beautiful. But what I was really waiting for was a chance to use a lens I don't have with me today, which is the 28mm Summilux. That's the 28 f1.4, and that is a lens that you can do these sorts of shots with, because it really brings in more light. I mean, compared to my Elmar, the 28mm Summilux is 2 stops faster, 2.5 stops faster. So that means you can have 2.5 times less light and still get the same result, and that's really worth having. So this is actually a vertical stitch, because the 28mm isn't really wide enough to get all the sky in and the foreground. So what I've done is I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shots at the same exposure, going from the foreground to quite high up. So this is probably a 90-degree or 100-degree shot, and it's stitched together in Lightroom later on, and it's come up beautifully. And there's another one a bit later on. I wanted to get the Milky Way behind the gap at, this is Glen Helen near Alice Springs, and I wanted also the stars to reflect in the water in the foreground. So I think I've managed that one, and that's on that 28mm Summilux as well, as a vertical stitch. Panoramas don't have to be horizontal, you know. And this is Mount Sonder in the distance. This is the view from Glen Helen. So from very near to that last shot, this is a view over the plains towards the mountains. This is looking northwest. Gives you an idea of that fantastic Australian outback. This is on the 50mm, probably on the Noctilux actually. I didn't have the Summilux with me. I didn't need 2 fast 50mm lenses, so I just took the one. And at 5.6 or 8, it acts like any other 50mm lens. But obviously you've got the option of going to 0.95 as well for a particular effect. But that only works when you want to separate the background from the foreground. And this is an old truck that we found near Glen Helen. That's that same mountain in the distance you can see. But can you see how the focus falls off quite quickly, both in the foreground and the background? So this is still a 50mm lens, but I'm focused at f/0.95 on the truck, and it has that 3-dimensional feel to it, which I really like with Leica images. Same truck, same lens, a lot closer, background's out of focus nicely. Probably not at 0.95 because the background's not incredibly out of focus. I've probably picked my focus point on the superstructure of the car, maybe probably where the front grille, and then let it drift off after that. And I've converted it into black and white because it's my picture. I can do what I like with it, and I really enjoy the black and white. So it's an example of what you can get when you do a nice black and white conversion. Bit cheesy maybe this one, but you know, we were doing the walk at Kings Canyon. Again, I just took the M10 with me. This is a dawn shot. We walked up the first part of the walk, which is the steepest part, in the dark, so that we were on a rocky promontory for when the light actually picked up. And as the sun rose, we got this spectacular dawn. And that in the distance, you can see, if I can move my mouse, that's the creek bed that goes up here. And this is the well-known walls of Kings Canyon. That wall there is around about 300 feet high. Maybe 200-300 feet high. It's really big. So the scale of this picture is a lot bigger than you might imagine. And this is the last picture. This is an aerial shot from near Alice Springs. I wanted to do some abstract aerial shots, so we took up a little Cessna and opened the window, and again shooting on the M10P out of the window. This is on that 28mm Summilux lens to get a bit of a sense of view. And that mountain that I referred to before, Mount Sonder, is this mountain over here. So those previous shots were taken in Glen Helen, which is in this little mountain range here. and there's a road which sweeps all the way through this serpentine area, right the way back to Alice Springs, with this very distinctive bluff sticking up. It's a very distinctive part of the world and quite spectacular, and from the air it looked brilliant. Camera's perfectly good in the air. There's, again, nothing it can't do. So that's a few pictures. Let me just come back to me. There we are. So just really showing you the sorts of images that I take in my spare time. I'm a commercial photographer. I take pictures for clients, but it doesn't mean to say I can't just go out and have fun. And for that, I find the M10-P perfect. Just one lens, two lenses, no more than three. Sometimes I'll just take out the 50mm lens, and I do it just to enjoy myself, because it's that kind of camera. It's there to indulge your love of photography. So if you've enjoyed this video and you like this style of information presentation, please feel free to check out our YouTube channel. Maybe click the subscribe button, leave a comment, something like that, or even check out our Leica Academy website just to see what else we've got on offer. So my name is Nick Rains from Leica Academy. Great talking to you all, and I'll talk to you again in a future video. Bye for now.